This is part two on our mini series on how to build a marketing team from scratch. On today's episode, we're going to give you a behind the scenes look on our hiring process. That means the good, the bad, and the ugly. Demand Gen U is officially in session. Let's do it.
So this is a little bit crazy, but we actually still don't have a full-time people person. So, we've got help from a contractor, but really we've been managing this hiring process on our own. And that's on top of, everything else that we've been trying to do. A 3-person marketing team trying to grow to 7 in the span of like a month or two is challenging. And, we're kind of about to do that again. So we're going to add 4 more people in the next 6 months. We have a lot of experience of this now. And we've gone through a lot. And so we have a lot to share. We know kind of, what worked well for us, what didn't, and what we're changing maybe, coming into this next round of hiring. So yeah, that's the stage. So let's
If
jump
it sounds
into
crazy, it's because it is, but this should be a good one.
Yeah, like I honestly, my background, the big companies, you have recruiters and everybody in HR, and literally everything is really well organized for you. And so coming into this with us last year, I had no idea what it would be like, and it was wholly different than what I had thought. But in a lot of ways good, and in some ways just more challenging. So we'll talk through it. So maybe we can help some folks through this process if you're going through it now, or maybe avoid some of the stuff that we didn't avoid.
Let's do it. So there's a couple areas that we want to talk through, and it's all about the hiring process. So we're going to talk through some of our, I'd say, secrets, or I guess a better way of saying it is lessons learned. I think how we vet candidates for the specific roles that we're hiring, what our actual interview process looks like, and then, it's a two-way street. So how do you make sure that both sides feel good about finding the right fit? So I think the first thing, and this is a piece of advice, but it's because we learned the hard way, it's think about the roles that you need way before you actually need to hire for them. So let's unpack that a little bit. How do you think we came to that learning, Jason?
Yeah, so you don't really quite understand how long it's going to take to hire somebody, or you kind of understand it, but you ignore it sometimes, And so, so let's say in our situation, for example, I didn't have 4 hires approved at the same time. I had a couple staggered, and this is the funny thing. I had them in the budget, and then one day I opened the budget, and I was like, oh shit, there's 2 people we were supposed to hire that I'm not on top of yet. And it was like August, and it was September was the first month that we had the budget, set aside for them. And I was like, well, damn, that's bad on me because we need people. And here I am, like, I put it in the budget, and then I didn't go back and say, oh, hey, can I hire these? And let's get going. So when you start late like that, and you really want somebody, then... And in this market right now, it's going to take time. And so if you can think about the roles you need well in advance, and then really start to, and we'll probably talk about this, start your hiring process then, that's really, I think, that's what's going to get you ahead of this. And not feel like you're rushing or you have to make a quick decision. I think that's one of the worst things that could happen is if you actually try and optimize to hiring time.
I think it's similar to just marketing in a lot of ways, because if you think about when we had these roles approved, and when we say these roles, for everybody listening, we're talking about the 4 positions that we got approval for, posted the job positions on the same day, and then ironically enough, filled all of them in the same calendar month. So it's very hard to have good talent come to you when you are a Series A company with very little but growing brand awareness and no recruiters. So if you're relying on candidates to find you, which I don't want to say that we relied on them, but I think we were hoping that we were going to have very good candidates come to us. that was just a mistake that we made, because similar to marketing, you can't rely on inbound and inbound alone to get you the right candidates.
Yeah, especially when your awareness is low, which is interesting. But I think, one of the things I learned through this process is we were actually more attractive at that point, which is interesting. But if you're relying on the inbound, like you said, it's limiting, right? Because it's basically people who are in market for a job right now, usually. You know what I mean? I don't think often somebody really good, really well positioned in their current role and happy would just see us post like, hey, everybody, we're hiring for 4 roles. And they'd be like, yes. You know what I mean? Like, let me in there. Let me knock on the door. Because they're already happy, right? And they're like, oh, and they're doing well. And those are the people that you want, right? And so those are not usually the people that are applying because they're happy. They're not looking. So oftentimes they don't even know you have a role open.
And just so everyone knows, we went from a team of 2 to 7 in about, 5-ish months. And for the 5 hires that we made, 4 out of the 5 were outbound candidates who weren't actually looking. And I think we love the team that we have right now. So the person who was actively looking is still an awesome addition to the team. But I think it goes to show that the majority of the candidates that we filled, we had to go find ourselves. So why does that matter? Like B2B SaaS, it's a long sales cycle. We were talking to people for months. They've got pretty good gigs. They're comfortable. They like what they're doing. They weren't looking. Similar to how you'd sell software, like you have to sell a lot to get somebody to move when they weren't ever looking to move in the first place. And for, Justin Simon, our senior content marketing manager, he had been in his company for a while. So when I randomly sent him a LinkedIn DM out of the blue, like he didn't have to respond, but it took a long time to be able to get him to, see why this was so, attractive of a position. We could sell him right away, but he had to weigh a lot of things. And, usually candidates who you are outbounding to, they're going through the same thought process.
Yeah. And through that, through outbounding, you're building a relationship, I think more so than like an inbound applicant. That's more transactional, it feels like, you know what I mean? And so like, if you're already building that relationship, and that's the people we're looking for, you know what I mean? Like we're looking for somebody who really wants to be in it. You know what I mean? It's like passionate about what they do, good at what they do, and like really want to blow that discipline, like do something interesting and new with that discipline. And so, having that time, through the outbound process, you have that time to build that relationship, and you're able to see things that you just can't see, I think, in more of a transactional like applicant process. Because I think you're having conversations that aren't interview related. You're actually like brainstorming on things. You're like, oh, we could do this and we could do this. So you're already getting that like almost like what it would be like, a little bit of like what it would be like to work with this person. And I think they're also a little disarmed too, because they're coming to that first conversation just like, oh, let's just get to know each other and talk shop, and they're not. Then we pitch slap them.
Well, like a perfect example is something that we're going through right now, and without giving too many of the specifics, there was a role that I think we may end up hiring for very soon here, maybe not, and it is not posted anywhere. There's no job description, and what I did was, and I think I did this without telling you, Jason, I just reached out to that person, and I wanted to have an intro call with them. I laid all the cards on the table and said, this role does not exist, so you're not going to find it anywhere. You can help me shape this role if you're interested in it. And then you just get like a good, honest conversation where people, to your point, are themselves. They're not this buttoned up version that has all the answers prepared in an interview style format, because, there's no real script that we're talking through in those combos.
Yeah. And let's take a minute to talk about why these people actually accept these requests from us now as well. And this gets into the importance of your brand. You know what I mean? And so like when we hired Justin, I think we were like, people were noticing it. So I think Justin probably like was like, oh yeah, I kind of see their stuff.
but you for sure, you were a customer though, so you kind of saw a little bit of the inner workings, which made sense. But I remember like when I was hiring for your role, like metadata, huh? What do you want me to do? It was like, and it was really hard. But like in this second round, I was honestly like, and I remember telling you about this. I was like, sometimes I'd actually feel awkward because people would get on the calls like, I can't believe I'm talking to Jason. I'm like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, well, you're all LinkedIn, you know what I mean? I see you on LinkedIn. I feel like I know you. And it actually felt a little, for me, it was like a little uncomfortable. I was like, oh yeah, I know, it's all good. But that, I think, I can't overstate how helpful that is in us getting really high quality candidates now. And I wouldn't have really, I mean, it makes sense, right? It just makes a lot of sense, but I wouldn't have been thinking of it that way, or of like all the great marketing work that we've been doing would actually have such an impact and make our hiring, I mean, it's still hard, but make it easier for us to find like really solid candidates, and those candidates being excited, like really excited.
Yeah, I think what's unique though is how you and I both go at posting on LinkedIn. Like we are the same exact people that we are in real life in a work setting as we are on LinkedIn. I don't truly believe that everyone functions in that same way. I think a lot of people are not themselves on LinkedIn, which for us, it works out better because, to your point, then people already have an understanding of who we are, what we're like, the fact that we don't take ourselves too serious, and that goes a long way because there's not as much feeling out that needs to be done because they know us already a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's true. Actually, I've had several people say like, "Oh, you're just the same." You know what I mean? Like this is like, "Oh yeah, this is like." I'm getting the exact same Jason that I thought you would be like, from your posts and stuff like that. So I think that's good, because then we're like, good, we're being authentic to ourselves, and people are noticing it. And I think that also draws people in, because people want to work for people that are transparent, authentic, and so I think that helps us too, gets us a leg up before we even talk to them the first time.
So you mentioned outbounding and how we've gone about doing this, and I think it's a little easier now because we've got a brand that we're building. It's becoming a little bit more recognizable. That people have seen it, they know we're up to something. Maybe they don't know exactly what metadata does, but we'll change that soon. But also we have so much more social proof to use, and I'm huge on social proof. So the fact that we can mention some of the big B2B companies that we're working with, the fact that we can mention we're working with Dave Gerhardt in an advisor capacity, some of the other big stuff that we have planned, like the example that I used or that referred to a few minutes ago, I basically had a checklist of, hey, these are all the things that we're doing. This is what's coming. Oh, by the way, Dave Gerhardt's working with us. And on the receiving end of that, you're like, well, of course I'd want to at least listen to this.
Yeah.
Like, why would I not? So again, it's easier once you start to build some momentum, but it was really hard at first because we just didn't have that notoriety.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not simple, but I guess the message is focus on your brand and really building a solid brand, especially when you're hiring marketers, but really anybody. It helps actually with engineers, it's helped with sales. It helps in all the roles. But your brand has an effect on the type of people you'll be able to bring in. Yeah.
Yep. And then the last thing I'd say is just whenever you're doing this for candidates, think like you're writing a cold marketing email to a decision maker at your target account. Like it feels dumb to say, but also why would you ever lead in, hey, I noticed you're a such and such at this company. I would like to talk to you about a position. Like, no, like get to the point right away, show some social proof, ask if it's piqued their interest, and then go from there. Like you can use almost the same exact template that you would use for outbound marketing emails.
Can I use $100 incentive?
No, we're trying to get away from those. And then you're bribing people. No, I'm sure you probably could.
Will you please interview with me? I'll give you $100 Amazon gift card on the back end.
You should be on payroll at this point. All right, let's get into finding the right candidates for the roles. So again, it's going to depend based on the exact role, but what are some of the things that you're looking for, in 2022 that maybe don't come through in a resume?
That don't come through in a resume. Yeah, I mean, so this is after we're talking to them then, I guess, if it's not coming through on the resume. So like what I'm looking for, so I'm looking on the resume, I'm looking for basically like, at this point, have they done this before at another like high growth startup? I think that right now, especially like when you're in high growth, you really need people that have done it before. But what you can't really check for in resumes or just like even writing or anything is like these non-tangibles like resiliency, you know what I mean? That's honestly like really the biggest one for me. Like how resilient is this person? I think passion for me as well. I think most if not every person we hired was pretty passionate about the product already, or after seeing it was like, oh, Jesus, yes. Like, you know, kind of like my first reaction when I first saw it. And so that passion of like, are you know, this is more than just a job for you. So, and then why is it that way? You know what I mean? So not just that, like you say, it's more than a job, but like really why, you know, and digging into the why, like why, you know, why are you willing to come join a high growth startup? You know, most companies out there are trying to grow 10% a year. We're trying to grow 150%. You know, why would you put yourself through that? And really kind of understanding that, and really, you know, and what makes them tick, because, you know, to do this well and keep that stamina, you have to have something that you're working towards. You know what I mean? So it's like, I like to understand that why. Is it money? That's okay. Like that's a primary motivator for most people. Is it you want to prove something to yourself that you can do this? I love that, you know, kind of a thing too. Like I've never done this before, but man, I'd love to get this done, and I'd love to have this, like, be able to say I've done this before. So it's these non-tangible things, like the experience. I just grease through a resume. I'm like, the resume is like, okay, have you been at a startup before? Have you stayed, you know, at least longer than a year in most of your roles? That's all I'm really looking for. Are you kind of early-ish in your, are you not early in your career, but are you on a pretty fast trajectory? You know what I mean? Kind of where you're at in your career and what kind of where you've reached. That's all I'm really looking for in the resume. Then everything else has to come out through through talking.
So I'm going to out myself here. I don't think I've ever shared this with you, so I'll let, you know, whoever's listening and you in on a secret. I haven't asked for a single resume yet. And
Nice.
That is because the positions that I've hired for have all been from outbounding. And I think we'll get into a little bit of the why I felt comfortable not having to ask for a resume. But the biggest thing is, you know, call it personal branding, call it whatever the hell you want. Like, we are looking for people who get the new way of marketing in 2022 and beyond. And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about is how active are people on LinkedIn, and not the, you know, post every day for the sake of posting and end every post with thoughts or tagging people like influencers in your posts, like not that bullshit, but just people want to buy from companies where they feel like they know the people who are working there. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to have all of our team members, you know, position themselves as experts in what they do so that our future customers can learn from them before they become a Metadata customer. And it's something that some people are not just interested in, but want to do. Some people are kind of on the fence, and some people just aren't interested in doing it at all. And for us, I don't want to say it's a requirement, but it's pretty close to a requirement.
Yeah, we definitely talk to people about that, and at least there's a desire there, or at least an understanding of why it's important, you know, and then, you know, like, okay, like, we'll help you out with that, you know, if you need help. But yeah, no, you're right. One of the early things, you know, that I knew we needed when I first started here is, like, the brand feels like it's a computer. You know what I mean? Like, the brand felt like, you know, a computer. Yeah, I was like, we got to humanize this. And that was really, you know, just one of the best ways we could do it is just starting to put our faces with normal, transparent, authentic posts, you know, like, yep, we're real people over here trying to build a very complicated product. We're not a bunch of robots, you know, over here, like behind, you know, like writing robot copy and writing, you know, robot whatever. And it's what, you know, yeah, you need that. You need that personal touch.
All right, so let's get into the next part. This will be a little bit longer, but what our interview processes look like. And I say processes because you're hiring for roles, I'm hiring for roles. We kind of have similar processes. We kind of have different processes. So walk me through what your process looks like, and hopefully you know what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jason is a process
This
guy.
is actually, yeah, this is honestly something I've struggled with my entire career, and I've hired so many people. I probably don't put enough process into it. I use my gut more than anything else. And that is because my gut hasn't let me down yet, or when I've gone against my gut, it's come around and been like slapped me in the face. And so it's just from experience. I've learned that that is, for me, the most important factor. But that might not be the best experience for candidates, to be completely honest, because what it really means is every interview I do is fairly unique. I don't have really a set of, I do have some questions that I pretty much ask people, but I usually ask people, just walk me through the last 5 years of your career. You know what I mean? And then I basically use that to like draw things out, ask other questions, and I kind of form it around there. I have a bit of an opinion about what I think I need to touch on before I get into a meeting. And for me, it's at least 2 to 3. I got to have 2 to 3 separate times to meet with them, even before I can really form. Well, no, that's not true. I can actually have an opinion immediately after the first meeting, and I can say no at that point pretty easily. But for somebody that is, going to make it through, I need to have several touch points, and honestly, in different contexts, and even setting a different context with the candidate. Like, okay, this time we're just gonna brainstorm about this topic, and I just kind of want to see what that feels like, with you. Or no, this one's going to be more of an interview. I'm just going to like kind of ask you questions, and then at the end of it, we obviously have them interview with other people, and I take that feedback. But it really comes down to the gut. Do I feel like I can really work closely with them? Do we share? Will they be an add to the culture that we have? Will they bring opinions that we don't have? You know what I mean? So trying to diversify the thought. Yeah, and then and then we make an offer.
So you make it sound so simple. So when you bring other people in to the interview process, whether it's marketing team members or people from other parts of Metadata, what exactly are you using them for and having them vet?
Yeah. I usually try and connect them with somebody that they would be working with, or that would have like a job that's tangentially related to what they're doing. So like, for example, with Maza, our marketing ops manager, we had to meet with Sam, who's our sales ops person.
Just so we're clear, he's not like Cher, Madonna, or Seal. Like, why are we calling him Maza? I think people should know.
It's what he wants to be. No, we have 2 Alexes on the team. Excuse me. So I'm trying to train myself to say Maza. But yeah, it's his last name.
Sorry,
Maza.
I think it was good context. Keep going.
Alex. And if it's somebody in demand gen, like maybe somebody in sales, you know what I mean? Like, let's make sure like there's some alignment there, and that the sales rep feels like, oh yeah, this person's coming in with the right attitude around like demos and leads, etc. And yeah, I'm really just looking for their thoughts on how they would be able to affect them in their role, and then also like, how do you think they would fit culturally too? Because I don't 100% trust my gut on like the culture stuff, and I think it's because most of the company is much younger than I am, and so I kind of rely on you and some other folks too to kind of help me with like, is this gonna work out? Are they gonna like work with the like? Because I'm like, I could definitely see working with them, but will this work with the rest of the team? And that I actually made one decision during this last hiring process completely based on you and Sam's feedback on culture, really. And I was like all about this person, and yeah, because if you're not going to like listen to what other people are saying too, then like, why would you have them interview? And so I wanted to make sure that like, okay, I hear you guys too.
So one little disclaimer, just so everybody knows, we are not trying to hire for, just 20 something culture at Metadata. I think, I don't know our exact age, but I know it definitely skews a little younger. But whether we're intentionally doing this or unintentionally doing this, I do feel like we have candidates meet with people from a variety of different backgrounds, ages, ethnicities, you name it, so that we are getting everyone's perspective on whether or not they think that that person not would just fit in at Metadata, but would they help add to the culture too. So we are trying to not hire for the same exact people that we are, because what fun or good would that be?
Yep. What's your hiring process like?
You're not off the hook yet, so I'm going to give you 2 quick questions. What do you think has worked well in your process, and then what do you think hasn't worked well in your process? And then I'll do the same.
Yeah, I think what's worked well is trusting my gut. You know what I mean? So I think that does serve me well. What hasn't worked well, I think, is because each interview process for me can be unique. It means I probably don't really have apples to, I don't often have just like an apples to apples comparison, and so I'm sure I have, I don't even know the word I'm looking for, let people go out of the process that I probably shouldn't have because my process wasn't super consistent. I probably missed out, I guess, on some people, probably.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that we as a marketing team and company probably will have to change as we scale this thing pretty significantly, because it can't, there needs to be a little bit more process and rigor, I'd say, in it. We can't just wing hiring and go off of gut feel every single time. It's gotten us to here. I just don't think that it will get us to where we need to be.
Yeah, I'm going to change it up next time we go through a round of hiring here soon. I'm looking to change up my process this time.
Sweet. So I will go at the same questions that I gave you. So where I get started with my hiring process is actually the job description. And it sounds really elementary, because you have to have a job description when you are hiring for a position. But this is a hill I'll die on. You can tell a lot about the team that you're walking into, the leadership that you're walking into, and the company that you're walking into just by the job description. And what I mean by that is that one of those job descriptions where there's 25 responsibilities that could be owned by 6 or 7 truly different positions? Or is it one role that has, some stretch responsibilities, but all of the responsibilities are something that could typically be owned by a single person? So in order to make sure that that comes through in our job descriptions, and not just mine, but I know the ones that I've worked on with you too, we write it and we go get feedback from experts in our network that we trust and get their feedback on it and say, would we attract the right type of person with this job description? Yes or no? And I think we have some honest conversations up front, and sure enough, the job descriptions that we've used have been tweaked so that they're attracting the right people, because I think that goes a long way.
I mean, that could be a good outbound tactic too, right? Hey, can you take a look at this job description for me that you're an expert at and let me know, would you be excited about this role?
I mean, that's the tactic that I used for the person that we're not going to name, because I said, hey, do you want to help me come up with this job description? Which that in itself was a little test.
Yeah.
So that was something that I typically do. I think what I also do is I will go through the LinkedIn Recruiter, and start to try to figure out, of the profile of person that I'm looking for, what exactly does that profile look like? So if we are working with any outside help or recruiters, that we can give them a little bit more guidance on, hey, find people whose profiles look and sound like this. I think that goes a long way. And then what I try to do, just because a lot of the success has been from outbound, is I was blocking off, a certain portion of my week I'd say every day for an hour or so to just do outbound. And, it's like an SDR, it's a numbers game. You've got to find enough people that are worthy of reaching out to, and you've just got to start reaching out. And it takes time, but also I feel guilty of this as I was going through it. We complain about not having enough time to do, the work that we need to, when in reality, if you find the right people, that's going to free you up anyways. So how can you make excuses that you don't have time to do hiring?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when, you're in that motion. Question for you. When you're outbounding, do you have a system you use to track like the progress? Because that's where I get lost in outbounding. I'm like, I just sent a message to 17 people, and now I don't even know like who I sent it to and what I said. So what do you do
so
for
there's two things that I've used. The first is the statuses within LinkedIn Recruiter, so you can at least see who you've sent something to and who you've replied to. That gets you part of the way there if you're just managing it in LinkedIn. I think midway through last year, we got an applicant tracking system, and we've been using it with some success, some frustrations. But it's very manual. I see Jason shaking his head. I'm trying to be Switzerland here. I think you can read between the lines. What I've been doing is then kind of truing up, all right, these are all the people that I've reached out to in LinkedIn. Let me look at who's in the applicant tracking system. Is it like perfect? Absolutely not. Is it good enough? I would say maybe. I still don't have a whole lot of confidence in it, but I think at any given time, I'm trying to figure out in my head who are like the batches of people that I'm talking to in similar stages. It makes me sound crazy as I say this out loud, but again, a lot of this is challenging because we're doing this ourselves on top of all of the other things that marketers have to do. So I'd say that's like the first part in just finding these people. And then I'd say the initial conversation or two is very similar to how you interview people hey, let's just have a conversation. We don't really have to talk a whole lot of true shop about the role yet. And I think you can get a really good feeling for the person on a personal level. And then two, is this a person that even warrants a follow-up conversation where we need to talk shop? So it usually takes me, I would say, two, probably 45-minute conversations, maybe a 30-minute intro call before I even figure out, hey, is this somebody that I'd want you, Jason, to meet with?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wonder if a platform exists out there, like an applicant outbounding, like an outreach for hiring. Somebody help me. Tell me if that exists.
I want to say I need to look through this, and the next episode that we do, I will make note to start the episode off by what I found. I feel like Outreach's initial use case was for something similar to like outbound sales, but it wasn't actually outbound sales. It may have been hiring or it may have been something else.
Oh, interesting.
So we'll see. I'm like 50, 60% sure that it was hiring related, but I'm 100% sure that it was not, outbound sales at first. So I'll give myself a little homework assignment.
I didn't know that.
And then the second thing that we do is I have them meet with, anyone who they'd be working very closely with, which I think is pretty standard. But I also am fairly prescriptive on any objections or concerns or things that I want them to explore a little bit further. And I know that you do the same too, just so that we're not going with just a completely blank slate for every single interview. And I think that's helpful. I'm not trying to cloud the person's, thoughts as they're going into the interview, but if there's something that I either didn't address or, completely overlooked, I make sure that whoever else is interviewing the candidate knows to push on that.
Yeah, right. You mean like areas that you had questions on about them and you wanted to, yeah, right. Yeah. It reminds me of so I was at Microsoft and this hiring process that we had there, I'll just be a quick story. It was so rigid to the point where in a Microsoft interview back then, it was 8 hours on site. And it was so interesting. It'd start with, and you'd get together. There was actually the system that they built in-house, and you'd all assign roles to the interviewers. And literally one of them was the mean person. It was literally and it wasn't called the mean person, but I don't remember what the role is. Yeah. But through each stage of the process, after every interview, somebody could say no, and then literally the rest of them get canceled that day. I mean, it was just such a rigid process, and the questions that you had to ask, and then how you typed up the answers. I mean, it was just so I don't want it to be like that, but you know what I mean? I think we should definitely, we'll add more process. And I think what was nice about that process is if interviewer 1 had some objections, they automatically put it in the thing, and then interviewer 2 or 3 in that same day could touch on those exact things and dig into it a little bit more. So from that part, it worked well. But the bad part was like when you did have to let somebody go midday, because then they knew immediately. They're like, oh, damn it. You know what I mean? It was like, but that was like the hardest. Luckily, we didn't have to do it. But so anyway, yeah, we won't be like that. And I don't think anybody really should. I'm sure Microsoft has probably changed it up a little bit from that. But this was over 10 years ago.
Awesome. So I'll get into what worked and hasn't worked for me in my hiring process, and then we can get into two of the questions that we have. The questions are a little open-ended, so they may take a little bit. What's worked? So I think for me, the biggest thing that's worked is outbounding, because you have a little bit more control over who you are trying to have an intro call with. Now, again, it takes more time, it takes effort, but I think we've seen better conversations just in general with candidates. And then, of the 5 roles that we hired for after me, 4 out of the 5 have been all from outbound. So I think the track record kind of proves it. What hasn't worked?
Yeah.
I would say, and I'm going to steal a little bit of thunder of what I think one of my answers will be for the Q&A, but trying to keep candidates on a similar schedule. And what I mean by that is, it never works that you've got 5 candidates that that you really feel good about, and they're all on the same stage. And I think for me, and I've gotten feedback on that, and I took it personally, and I've already tried to make some changes on it. Candidates said, hey, the hiring process just felt too long. And I think, I'll own that. I think I can make excuses, some of them excuses as to why it happened, but I think there were some learnings of, hey, rather than try and get all these candidates to the same stage, like just trust your gut in that moment of, hey, do I actually feel like this is somebody that I want to work with, or am I just trying to make sure that I end up with someone as opposed to no one? So that's been a big learning for me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say for me, and we haven't touched on this, so I will. One of the successes I had was using a recruiter. You know what I mean? And so we didn't talk about that, but if you don't have internal recruiting staff, find a firm that specializes in your role, not a generalist recruiter. I don't think so. We had good luck. We had a lot of great candidates that came. We used 2 recruiters. We had one that was more of a transactional one, and then one that was a more high touch. And we both got a lot of great candidates, and I hired one of them from Sloan. I'll just give them a shout out from Sloan Recruiting, and Max over there. Great folks, especially if you're hiring marketers, and I think they dabble in sales as well. And so that was I think a win for us. It helped me get ahead, from where I was at in the hiring process. And then I think what didn't work, it's an offshoot of what you said, but it's communications. You know what I mean? It's comms with the candidates. Like I had to apologize. I can't tell you how many times I had to start off an email like, I'm so sorry. This has taken me a week to get back to you. Like I can't even tell you how many times, and that doesn't feel right. But what's interesting is, if I take myself back to when I was candidates and all these, and I would be like, why the fuck is it taking a week? Who is so busy that they can't get back to a good candidate in like a week? And now I'm like, oh, this is actually what happens. This actually does happen, where I'm like, this is a great candidate, and I've just let them go for a whole week. I'm sorry, but it does happen. Like we do get so swamped sometimes, where it's like, it's an excuse, but it's reality. And so I think that's one thing I want to try and fix next round.
Alrighty, I think we got time for one question. It's a meaty question for Q&A, and then we got to wrap up. So what's the biggest mistake you've made in the hiring process at Metadata?
I think it's what I've alluded to, which is the lack of consistency in my own process. And if the head of marketing has a lack of consistency in his process, then it's not, it's basically then up to you, you know what I mean, to have your own process. And if we both have our own, then I don't want a separate candidate experience if you're hiring them or if I am. And so I think that's probably mine. I'd say like that. That's probably the biggest one, is that I didn't think enough about it. And I just kind of shot from the hip. And we'll
Did you just do finger guns when you said that?
I did. Yes.
All right. Just want to make sure that everyone else heard. Yeah.
I had to pull it out of the holsters. They were in the holsters.
Oh my God. We'll see how many finger gun references there are on future episodes. I think the biggest thing for me, and this was really I'll say enough without giving away too much. This is a really big learning experience for me in my career and just as a hiring manager, because I had never had to deal with this before, is what happened earlier this year when we were trying to fill the senior content marketing manager role. And I think without getting into details, the candidate that we were talking to, we had to resell at the end. And it was a weird feeling because we knew that we needed the role filled. We thought the candidate was the right fit. The candidate had some, I'd say, cold feet, whatever the the right saying is, at really right before we were about to extend the offer. And we had to resell the candidate on that. And I think the lesson for me was you should never have to resell the candidate at that point in the process. Like, they're either bought in or they're not. And it didn't work out, for us, and it didn't work out for the candidate, which sucks. It was something that we learned from and had to work through. But I hadn't ever experienced something like that before, and know that I shouldn't do that again.
Yeah, and then guess what? Then Jason went and did it again, and it didn't work out. Yep. So I think we both now learned that lesson. I didn't have to learn it because Mark told it to me, and then I decided to go ahead and learn it again.
Burning their hands.
But So yeah, I love that one because I think this is applicable everywhere, not just a startup, not everything. Like, if you're really having to resell them, then I don't know if they're in it for the, then it's just, I think it's a no. You know what I mean? I think it should just be like, okay, then it's just not right. It's not the right time. It doesn't have to be like a bad breakup, but just like, okay, totally cool, but let me find somebody else.
Awesome. Well, I think we are just at time. This is a good one of the second episode in our little mini series on building a marketing team from scratch. So make sure that you subscribe, keep downloading these episodes. We see the downloads keep going up and to the right, which is good. And then make sure to keep hitting us up on LinkedIn with either questions that you want us to ask or any topic ideas that you have in mind. So until next time, thanks everybody.
Take care.